Hello, my name is Leonard, and this is the Symantec Enterprise Vault 10 for Exchange Administration. Lesson 7, Managing Client Access, Outlook Clients. This is the first of 3 lessons where we're going to be going through and looking at the various ways of accessing the mailbox archives that we had set up and started archiving in earlier lessons. We're going to look at first the Outlook clients, then we're going to look at the Outlook Web Access clients, and then finally we're going to look at Vault Cache and Virtual Vault. So for this lesson here, we're going to be looking at how to use the Outlook add-in to your Outlook environment so that you have access to your Enterprise Vault environment. We're going to look at how we can modify those through desktop policies. In an earlier lesson, we had gone through and talked about how to set up desktop policies, and we're going to look specifically at those desktop policies that apply to the Outlook client. So first is using Outlook with Enterprise Vault, and we're going to go through and look at the different ways and clients that are available for us to be able to connect. So first is the Outlook add-in. We're going to actually install an application on each individual client that is running Outlook. This is called an Outlook add-in. This is going to give you access to your archives either through toolbar buttons or menu options, and we will see that they will vary slightly based upon the version of the Outlook client that you have. There has been changes between the Outlook 2007 and earlier clients versus the Outlook 2010 clients. We'll look at specifically the differences between those as we go through the lessons. And we'll also talk a little bit about how the administrator will control what you have access to in the client application by configuring the desktop policies. And remember, those are being applied based upon your provisioning group membership and the administrator running the provisioning task to get that desktop policy assigned to the individual clients themselves. When we look at the Outlook add-in, there's 2 different modes that the Outlook add-in can run in. It can run in normal mode, and when you're installing the Outlook add-ins, you're going to go through and run a Windows installer named Symantec Enterprise Vault add-in, and then it'll have a hyphen, and there'll be 2 letters associated with that. Those 2 letters will represent the language that you're planning on installing on the client. For our particular example here, we will be using the English version of the client. When you do this installation, we'll find out that you can configure it to use either what we call the normal client or the HTTP only client. With the HTTP only client, there are some limitations, such as it does not allow the user to have access to the Outlook properties associated with Enterprise Vault. You can set this mode in the desktop policy, and we'll also see, based upon the version of Outlook that you're using, can determine which mode you will be in, either normal or HTTP only. And you do have the option for Outlook 2007 and earlier to use a separate installer package that will only install the HTTP only version. Here is the property in the desktop policy that allows you to set the mode that's going to be associated with the Outlook client. And you can see that we have both normal and HTTP only as our options here. A little bit later here in the lesson, we'll actually look at the desktop policy and see where we would find this particular property. And again, just some reminders of what's different between normal and HTTP only. When you are using the HTTP only, you cannot specify your destination archive or the retention category when you go to archive a particular item. Also, it doesn't provide you with the ability to either suspend or resume archiving, nor can you specify the locations when you are restoring items. Again, those are limitations of using the HTTP only version. So we've created a little table here that gives you the ability to compare and contrast what is available when you're using the normal, and they're showing you here that when we are using normal, we will be making DCOM or distributed component object model calls between the Enterprise Vault environment and the clients. So in both versions, we have the ability of opening shortcuts. Both versions can search the archives. Both versions can read the archives. However, our first differentiation starts with the restore from Vault. In the normal mode, you will be given the option to restore it to the current location or to a location that you specified called a restored items folder. However, in the HTTP only, you will not be provided with that option. When you go to archive items through the store in Vault command, again, you will be prompted for where you wish to store that item, whether it's in your default archive, or if you do have access to additional archives, you can choose those archives for storing that particular item. But again, with the HTTP only version, you will only be able to archive that message to the default archive for your mailbox account. And then we get to the last item, which is the modifying the Enterprise Vault properties associated with your archive. And in the HTTP only mode, you will not have any access to those properties. The next thing we need to consider is that if we need to distribute and install this particular add-in for Outlook to all the clients, how are you going to do it? A couple different ways. You could send a shortcut to the installation package through the welcome message. In an earlier lesson, we looked at the fact that you could customize the welcome message. You could also publish it in Active Directory. The Active Directory group policies give you the ability to be able to publish packages for distribution. And then, of course, you could use a third-party software tool, such as the Symantec Management Platform, to distribute that software as well. Some best practices to consider when you're starting to distribute and use the Outlook client with the Outlook add-in. Verify the compatibility chart to make sure that you do have the most recent version of the Outlook add-in and that your Outlook add-in matches the version of Microsoft Outlook that you are using. You should typically roll out the Outlook add-in to all of the users of Enterprise Vault prior to enabling their mailboxes for archiving. And then for the 2003 and 2007 clients, we recommend rolling out the normal client, which is the DCOM version, to all the individual users. Next we want to look at is, once we've got the client distributed and installed, how are you going to know that you have the client installed, and how are you going to be able to use that? Well, first we're going to start off looking at Outlook, and in this particular screenshot, we're going to go through and look at the shortcut icons that can be configured. Now again, in an earlier lesson, we did mention and show you how you can set up mailbox archiving to include shortcuts, but it's not a requirement to include shortcuts. But if you do install the Outlook add-in, one of the things that you will be able to see will be the shortcuts. So we're just going to go through and look at the icons associated with the shortcuts. The first icon that we're looking at is the shortcut to an archived item. So this shows you an item that has already been archived. You can double-click on the shortcut to return the original item. And if you just click on the item, based upon what you've configured in the mailbox policy, you will see the shortcut contents in the preview pane. We also have the pending archive, which means you've told this particular item to be archived. However, it hasn't actually completed the archive process, which could include the removal of the safety copies. And we talked a little bit about what safety copy removal involved and how to configure that in an earlier lesson. We also have the pending restore. If you have requested to restore a particular archived item, you will see this icon until the item is actually back in your Outlook, stored in the Outlook client memory, and then the icon will change back to a regular mail icon. And then we also have a pending delete, which if you have deleted this particular item and chosen to delete either the shortcut or the shortcut and the archived item, you will see the pending delete option available. We also will have on the Outlook toolbar, based upon what is configured in your desktop policy that's being applied to you, and we'll be looking at that desktop policy a little bit later in this lesson. But based upon what is being set up for your provisioning group with your desktop policy, you can see a variety of different icons on the Outlook add-in toolbar. On these toolbar, you have the option of seeing the Search Vaults icon, which gives you the capability of opening up the integrated search in Outlook. You have the expiry report, which will show you your expiry report. And in an earlier lesson, we talked about the concept of using the retention category in association with expiry to automatically delete items. So you can see a report that gives you the status of that process. You can also open up the Archive Explorer. And when you select this option, we'll see a little bit later that you can configure it to either open up inside of Outlook, or you can have the Archive Explorer open in its own separate window. And we will be looking later when we get into the lesson about the search tools, specifically about what you see inside of the Archive Explorer. We also have the Store in Vault. This is your typical, you wish to archive something, so you will click the Store in Vault, and then based upon the client that you have installed, either normal or HTTP only, will determine whether or not it brings up a pop-up to allow you to choose which archive to store it in, or if it just automatically stores it in your default archive. We have the restore from Vault, and again, this gives you the ability to retrieve the item, the original item from the archive and replace it back into your Outlook environment. We have the delete from Vault, which gives you the capability of deleting an item, and then again, based upon how your desktop policy has been configured, you may be prompted to either delete just the shortcut or to delete the shortcut and the archived item, and then you can choose that. And then lastly, we do have the cancel operation. In the previous slide, we looked at the pending delete and pending restore. If you have one of those icons, you can, and also pending archive, you do have the option of going through and canceling that operation. Now again, these are only going to show up on the toolbar if they have been configured for the desktop policy that applies to that particular individual client. Also, when we go through and talk about configuring the desktop policy for accessing Enterprise Vault, you can determine what's going to show up through the menu. And in Outlook 2003 and Outlook 2007, once you go to the Tools menu, if the Enterprise Vault Outlook add-in has been installed, you will see an option called Enterprise Vault on that menu. When you select that Enterprise Vault menu option, you will have a variety of menu options there, again, based upon what is configured on your desktop policy. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the lesson, there are a difference between the Outlook 2007 and earlier clients and how the Enterprise Vault add-in is represented versus the Outlook 2010 client. So let's look at how our items are going to be displayed for the Outlook 2010 environment. First off, in Outlook 2010, we're moving away from just having toolbars and menu items, and we're moving towards having the Office ribbon. With the Office ribbon, we will have various tabs that show up associated with the Office ribbon. So for a Outlook 2010 Enterprise Vault Outlook add-in, we will add a new tab to the Office ribbon. That new tab will be the Enterprise Vault tab. You can see on the Enterprise Vault tab the individual buttons that will show up based upon, again, the permissions that you have been provided with through the desktop policy. Now again, we don't have a separate menu option for the Enterprise Vault menu items, so anything that you've been configured for to use on the menu will show up under the More Actions option under the Enterprise Vault tab of the Office ribbon. Now you still can have the capability of customizing the Office ribbon in an Outlook 2010 environment, and if you do customize it, you can copy the icons to different tabs on the ribbons. You can also add them to a quick access toolbar that's available, and we show you an example of having a couple of the different Enterprise Vault buttons added to the quick access toolbar here in the screenshot that has been highlighted in red. Also, when you've added the Microsoft Outlook add-in for Enterprise Vault, you will be able to go to the File menu option, and there'll be a new File menu option for Enterprise Vault. And on the page associated with the Enterprise Vault File menu option, you will have a link to the Enterprise Vault Help System. You also will have a link to the version of the Outlook add-in that you're using. And again, this is where we talked about earlier in the lesson, using the compatibility guide to allow us to be able to verify that we are using the correct version of the Outlook add-in. We also have the option for selecting and specifying the Vault information. We'll look at what information is displayed in this Vault information in the troubleshooting lesson at the end of the course. You also, based upon what has been configured for your particular Outlook client provisioning group's desktop policy, specific items. For this example here, we've got an option to enable the Vault cache and configure Vault cache. Now you'll notice that the configure Vault cache is grayed out, and that's because we haven't enabled the Vault cache yet. And again, we'll talk about the Vault cache and Virtual Vault in a later lesson that deals with client application or client access. And then if you were given access to the expiry report will also show up on the Enterprise Vault file page. Now we just have a little table that's trying to summarize the differences between the Outlook 2003 and 2007 client versus the Outlook 2010 client. And we've kind of already gone through and shown you that graphically. So here is a table that summarizes that. And then we also have another table that gives you a comparison between the Outlook 2003 and 2007 buttons versus the Outlook 2010 buttons. Next, if we're talking about Outlook 2007, again, with the Outlook 2007, you have the capability of being able to use the normal or DCOM client. If you do have the normal or DCOM client, you should be able to right-click on any of your Outlook folders and open up the Enterprise Vault property page based upon that particular folder. So in this example, we've opened up the Inboxes property page, gone to the Enterprise Vault folder. On the Enterprise Vault tab, and you can see the different settings here that are being applied to your Enterprise Vault inbox. So they have things such as archiving items older than 0 days, deleting the original item after archiving. And again, when we talked about the mailbox policies and the different policies that are applied based upon your provisioning group, it'll be showing that here in this Enterprise Vault property tab. Also, it shows you the retention category. So Rita Jones has the retention category of department heads. And then if you have permission, you will be able to click the Change button to open up a property page to allow you to identify unique Enterprise Vault properties for this particular Outlook folder. Now, there's also a note here to remind us that if you do have only the HTTP-only client, you will not be able to see this tab. It will not be available to you. But if we do click on the Change button, and it is not the HTTP-only client, you can remove the check mark, which is there by default, which says to use the parent folder settings, and you can go through and customize whatever settings you have been allowed to configure based upon the desktop and or mailbox policy. So in this particular example, we're just highlighting one section that is grayed out, which is to delete original item after archiving. We cannot make the change there because if I look at the little excerpt that's below that, that excerpt came from the mailbox policy that's being applied to this particular user's mailbox archive. So they all have the lock set. So if they have the lock set, then you as an individual user will not be able to change that property. So that's why they're grayed out here. But you do have some options. You can specify which vault that you wish to store it in. You can also change the retention category if you wish. Those are available to you for your inbox. We're next going to look at just some different indicators that are going to show up based upon whether or not you have an item that hasn't been archived versus a particular item that has been archived. So here in our first screenshot, you can see that we have the normal mail icon, which is just an envelope. And when we select the normal mail icon, you will actually see the message being displayed in the preview pane. Whereas if I go and select a shortcut icon, I will see whatever has been configured for that shortcut icon's content. So in this case here, they have a banner being displayed. They've customized the setting, and we have the original message that's being displayed in that particular banner. Now again, you can configure that, and we will show you later in this lesson how you can configure what is displayed in the shortcut banner. To open a particular item up, to bring back the original text, you can just double-click on the shortcut, and it will open up the original item. You do have the capability with the Outlook add-in installed in your Outlook environment to retrieve items. You can just double-click on the particular shortcut to retrieve the item. You can also use the Restore button if you wish to no longer have a shortcut in your mailbox, but you want the original item there, and it shows you a representation of the toolbar icon for a Windows 2007 environment for the Restore option. Now, one of the other things that can happen, though, is if you do perform a restore of a particular item and re-archive it, that can cause problems, and we'll be looking at that in just a moment. But when you do retrieve the items, you can use shortcuts to retrieve the items. You can use either the integrated or browser search to retrieve the items, and you can also use the Archive Explorer. And we have a separate chapter later on that will get into the integrated and browser search and the Archive Explorer and how to use those for retrieving items. Here we're going to stick pretty much with the things that you're going to see in your Outlook environment. So looking at that, we're just going to look at some different ways that you can view your archived items. First, if you've opened up a shortcut inside of Outlook, this is what it's going to look like. If you do start the browser search option, and you can open this up based upon clicking on a shortcut link and then selecting browser search. So we've searched an item and selected it. You also have the option of previewing the item either in Outlook or a non-Outlook client. And again, in the preview, notice that it does have that banner there. So that's how I can tell that it is a preview version of the item. And then if I actually click on the link in the preview, it should return the original item as if it would have been opened inside of Outlook as a MSG or message file. When you are returning or viewing items from the search results, it's going to be calling an active server page named search02k.asp. That's the name of the actual file that's called as part of the Search Vault's icon. And then to actually retrieve the item, you're going to call another active server page named download.asp. Speaking of restoring the items, here I've got the shortcut for a subject item integrated project. I can go up to the toolbar, again assuming that the Restore Archived Items is available on the toolbar, or I could go through the Tools menu for Outlook 2007 clients. Once I click on the either menu item or the toolbar item, if I am using the full client, I will be prompted about where I wish to restore that particular item. So here you can see that I have the option of storing it in the current folder, and I'll tell you what the current folder is, in this case the inbox, or you can restore it to a folder called the Restored Items folder. If you don't already have a Restored Items folder, it will automatically create one for you. And then you also notice that you have the option of specifying whether or not you want to delete the shortcut once you have restored the original item. Now, another thing to consider is not to forget that if you have the HTTP only client, you will not be able to make that choice. It'll just automatically restore the item to the current folder. You do have the ability, if you have a shortcut item or an archived item, to open the shortcut and then you're able to read, reply, or forward. And again, that question comes up, can I do normal types of things in Outlook that I would do with a regular mail message? The answer is yes, you can read it, reply it, and forward it. If you don't have a shortcut to the archived item, then you would need to launch the Archive Explorer and then open the particular item from Archive Explorer, and then you would have the full functionality of being able to read, reply, or forward. I also alluded a little bit earlier in the lesson to the fact that if you do restore an item, that item will appear, based upon the archiving policy or rule, could be re-archived again. So in that particular case, they are exact copies of the original unless you've made a modification to them. So therefore, when the mailbox archiving task runs, it'll actually re-archive that item. Now that restored item, when it is re-archived, could actually be archived with a different retention category than the original item. However, because it is identical to the original item, if you have sharing turned on, that item should be restored or stored using the single instance storage or the deduplication process, which we had discussed in an earlier lesson. Some issues associated with archiving items. You really shouldn't attach a shortcut to a forwarded message because the sender or the receiver will have to have access to that archive when they receive that particular shortcut. Subsequent archive is based upon the restore date. So again, in an earlier lesson, we talked about the grouping of the retention category and the expiry. So therefore, basically, it restarts that counter based upon the restore date. With the Enterprise Vault add-in, you may not be able to delete existing Exchange folders in your Outlook environment. That's because there are still shortcuts in that Outlook folder, and you may not have permission to delete those particular shortcuts. And the Outlook 2003 and 2007 users do not have the capacity of archiving from any search folder. So if you've done searches in your Outlook environment and you see the results in that search folder, you won't be able to archive the item from that particular search folder. So now that we have the basics of how the Outlook add-in works and how we're going to distribute it and install it and how we're going to know if it has been installed, what types of things then can we do as an administrator to customize that Outlook add-in on the desktop. So to customize it, we need to open up the desktop policy. So now we've gone back over to the server for a moment. We've gone into our Enterprise Vault administration console, under our directory, under our site, under our policies. And again, everything associated with your Outlook add-in is going to be a desktop policy. So we selected a desktop policy, and for this particular example, we've opened up the policy associated with a desktop policy named Priority Desktop Policy. We've gone to the Options tab, and this is going to show you what is available on both the menu items. The menu items are going to be under the Enabled column, and then if it's going to show up on the toolbar, which will be under the On Toolbar column. We also have the option of specifying the shortcut behavior. When you go and say that you wish to delete an item that has a shortcut, you can have it delete only the shortcut. You can have both the shortcut and the archived item deleted. And then you also have the option of prompting the user to ask them what they really want to do. Do they only want to delete the shortcut, or do they wish to delete both? Okay, as we had mentioned earlier, you do have the capability of customizing the Enterprise Vault Outlook add-in in your Outlook environment, and that's done through the Advanced tab of the desktop policy. So here we've gone to the Advanced tab. Now, to do the settings that are associated with Outlook, you need to click on the List Settings From and select Outlook. And then we have a list here of some of the different things that you can configure based upon your Outlook environment. And what we've done in the pop-up is shown you the items that are hidden behind the scroll bar there. And we've highlighted that Outlook add-in behavior, which we had looked at on an earlier slide. And in this particular example, you can see it is set to HTTP only. For more details about these particular settings that are available for configuration with Outlook and what the different values will do for you, you can refer to the Enterprise Vault documentation, specifically the help and or the administrator's guide. We'd also mention that you do have the capability of customizing the information that is being stored or displayed in the shortcut itself. And that is either stored or displayed in a file named shortcut.text.txt. So in this particular example, starting off, we're showing you what is going to be displayed in the banner. So the banner, it's under the archive text section of this file. It's a IPM.note, and you can see this message is now archived, is displayed in the banner. Another example is the link section, and the text here says, click here to view under the item in the non-Outlook client, and that's in the shortcut.txt, and you can see the result in the actual shortcut banner. We also have the option, based upon what we're going to display our attachments as, and we had looked at in the mailbox policy what we could do for attachments. We cannot display them in the shortcut. We can display them just as a list of text, or we can display them as links. So in this particular case here, we are displaying them as links, but you can specify what you wish to have at the top of those links. So in this case here, it just says list of attachments. So this is just showing you a few of the different settings that you can configure in this shortcut text.txt file to control what's going to be displayed as part of your shortcut content. In this particular lesson, we looked at the different Outlook add-in types and how they are used to access your archived items. In addition, we identified the different buttons, icons, and menu options available in your Outlook interface, and that's based upon the Outlook version that you're using, and how you can configure them using the desktop policy. Our reference materials include the Enterprise Vault Administration Console Help, our Installing and Configuring Guide, the Setting Up the Exchange Server Archiving Guide, the Administrator's Guide, the Utilities Guide, and we also have a guide for your Outlook users, which is the guide for Microsoft Outlook users. And this brings us to the end of Lesson 7.